Welcome to Community Chats, bringing you stories and insights from the heart of Community Living Toronto, a non-profit organization that proudly supports people with intellectual disabilities and their families. We will focus on stories of belonging and inclusion and topics of interest from communities across Ontario and the world. From uplifting moments to breaking barriers, from innovative policies to ideas from leading thinkers, we continue to advocate for inclusive communities and support the rights and choices of people with an intellectual disability.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Saunders, CEO at Community Living Toronto. Welcome to our Community Chats podcasts. These podcasts are our opportunity to share, learn, and understand each other better. We release a new one on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so please listen, like, and give us your feedback. Community Chats is one of the ways that we stay connected, and we value your feedback. Today, I'm joined by Chris Beesley, CEO of Community Living Ontario. Chris is a dynamic and dedicated leader who represents more than 120 community living organizations across the province. Chris shares his insight into some of the challenges that individuals, families, and organizations are facing. We also talk about how we're working with government to stabilize supports and build a better future for people where they have more choice, autonomy, and feel more connected and belonging in their communities. Chris was the driving force behind the 5 to Survive campaign this past year, which resulted in an investment from the provincial government in organizations across the province. CLO is developing a new advocacy focus, which he shares here today. Chris is a good friend and colleague, and we had a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Thanks for joining us today. Just a bit more, Chris, before we jump into it. I mean, community living movement is really fortunate to have a lot of passionate and dedicated leaders. And I'd see you as one of them. So I've really enjoyed working with you over the last number of years. And I've gotten to know you as a leader that's got a real vision for the future, but also an understanding of what's going on now and the challenges faced by individuals and their families and communities and support agencies. And I really appreciate that way you sort of keep all that in your head and still try and move things forward. So really appreciate you taking the time out of what I know is a busy day and a busy time of year.
No, really happy to be here and have a conversation.
Great. So Petronella mentioned that you've been at CLO since 2013, but your involvement with the community living movement goes much further back and deeper than that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, sure. So, my wife, Laurie, and I live in Toronto. Now have 2 kids. Aaron's 23, and Mitchell just turned 30 a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, milestone there. More for his parents than him, I think.
I was going to say, you're aging well.
Feel. Yeah. But going back to when he was very young, and originally found out that he has an intellectual disability and the implications of that, we thought, well, what will a good life look like for Mitchell? And so that's when we got connected to Community Living Toronto, specifically around getting connected with our local daycare and making sure that it was an inclusive environment for him. And so Community Living Toronto was able to facilitate that intake process to assure them that that they were there to help with that transition. They were very willing, so it was a really great experience. And that continued through into Mitchell's inclusion in our neighborhood primary school. And so again, Community Living Toronto was part of that and making sure that to address any concerns that staff or the administration might have, and just to make sure that it was a smooth process. And so we really saw the value of what Community Living Toronto was all about and what they were there to help us do in the beginning. And that's then, once Community Living finds you, they want to keep you because here I am today, right? But so it was, and I forget who first approached me, but it was, hey, we have an inclusive education committee. Would you be interested? And so, of course, given the experience we had, they said, of course, that sounds really interesting. And so got involved with that. And then after a year or two, it was, hey, would you be interested in being on the board? And again, interesting though, that was 2001, I think. And so I stood for the board for election, and I wasn't voted in.
Oh,
So ouch, right?
yeah.
So, but luckily, the board in its wisdom had a spot in its back pocket that they were able to appoint. So I got in through the back door, and was on the board for 9 years. After that, in various roles, I think I was vice president a couple of times and chaired government relations and education. And I don't know, again, once you're in there, you sort of
You've done it all.
you've done it all. Yeah. So that was my introduction and my background specifically with Community Living Toronto. And luckily now that's, I'm able to combine my lived experience as a parent now with a professional role with Community Living Ontario. So it's you never know how life is going to twist and turn, but it was a very good twist and turn in my case. So
Great story, and thanks for sharing your journey, and thanks for sort of giving the perspective on how Community Living Toronto's been involved in your journey. I'm glad you're able to share that. So I think at last count that I was aware of, there's about 117 members of Community Living Ontario. Am I right? Or have you gone up?
now.
123. I'm at a date, but so that's good. So the organization continues to grow and really represents a strong advocacy voice in the sector or in the province for people with intellectual disabilities and those that are around them. What do you think, from your involvement in touching base with so many organizations across the whole province, what are the biggest challenges that you think the developmental sector is facing today?
Wow, how much time you got? Yeah, that's a big question, and I'll try and give a short answer. I think there's the obvious one is resources, right? And that's what, our recent Five to Survive campaign was all about, recognizing the critical lack of investment by government in a consistent way over a long period of time. And so I think that's where, a lot of our members hit the brick wall in terms of their responsibility that they feel and owe to the people and families that they support, and not having the adequate resources to do that. So I think that's an ongoing issue around the whole advocacy piece. I think another challenge, though, that our associations face is the connection, or sometimes lack thereof, to the families where they exist. Sometimes there aren't families, but where there are families, I think there's been sometimes families are unable to, or sometimes unwilling to be supportive, to be involved, to be part of their loved ones' lives. And in other times, the support organizations don't encourage that. And so there's a whole dynamic there that we see that I think we need to pay attention to if we're going to be organizations who are of the community, who are all about community connections, and we're all about inclusion. But if we don't start in our own backyard, what does that say about our commitment to community? So there's a whole discussion and something to unpack around that. And at Community Living Ontario, we're trying to reach out to we've identified about 125 family groups existing in Ontario right now, who are getting together mostly outside of our local association members. So that tells us something. So we're connecting more with that and trying to make those connections with agencies to try and, because if we're going to address those, lack of resource and waiting lists and all the things, it's not going to be in silos. It's going to be together. So we're really trying to lean into that right now.
That's good, and I think that's a great point. And it's always interesting to me that we're not better aligned, because there's intellectual disability touches tens of thousands of Ontarians. There are community living organizations in every riding across the whole province, and people, there's fantastic success stories everywhere. but there still seems to be, some back and forth and not enough alignment on key stuff. And it's more of we sort of look at it as a zero sum, where if somebody gets something, it means that you must therefore lose something. And it's certainly in our organization, it's a challenge to make sure that we can't be all things to all people, but we try and be, as good as we can and try and get better every day. Have you seen, what are your thoughts on how we do that, better? Are there examples of where it's worked better, where there really is a strong sense of community cohesion, collaboration, and alignment?
Yeah, we see examples of that certainly around the province, and there's no magic formula. I think, sometimes I hear, well, of course, in a big city, they have access to a lot more resources, a lot more things going on and things for people to do, and transportation is better. And so, they've people, agencies and families and people, they've got it a lot easier there. And then conversely, I hear from cities saying, well, of course, in a small town, you've got a much more sense of community and cohesion, and a lot more people know each other in their communities. And so it's a lot easier to make those connections. And so it's not an either or, it's a yes and. And so the idea that if you look at the connections you do have, look at the relationships that do exist, and look at for those opportunities. If there isn't transportation, what do other people do? Well, how can we connect to that? How can we connect to each other in the community? And what is our role as an organization to facilitate those connections and relationships? And it doesn't matter whether there's 100 people in a village or 3 million people in Toronto.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, to keep in mind as well that we're stronger together. We're better off together, and
Absolutely.
Working towards understanding our differences, coming together where we can, and pushing forward. So in the last year, Community Living Ontario was really involved in a strong advocacy campaign, along with Oasis and others, around advocating for a really critical, in this case, financial crisis within the sector, called hashtag 5 to Survive. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we got it and where things ended up?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, Brad, because it was certainly necessity was the mother of that invention, right? I mentioned about the crisis levels in lack of investment and funding. As an exercise in advocacy, it was really interesting to see, again, the one voice, the cohesion, the participation from everyone, and not just that you mentioned us and Oasis and other provincial organizations, but really at the grassroots, where people within communities who had an affiliation for this cause, they rallied, they went to their MPPs, they signed petitions, they really engaged with this issue. So it was an all hands on deck kind of situation, and it really taught us a lot about the value of that collective action, collective will. And so we really, we've thought of advocacy, I think, over the last number of years as more of a low simmer, a backroom meetings with ADMs and ministers and the bureaucrats and the politicians, and engaging on issues. And certainly we've always done that, and you folks at Community Living Toronto are really strong in that and making those relationships. But where has it gotten us? I think it's got us having positive relationships. We're able to have those meetings and be in the room and have constructive dialogue, but it hasn't moved the needle, at least from a funding perspective, in the last 30 years. No. And so, we really learned a lot from that, because we did get some movement on that, and we got collectively about 3% of the 5 we were asking for, where none was in the offing before that. So looking at that, it sort of said, okay, the environment's changed, the political landscape has changed. How do you cut through the clutter? How do we make a more collective, louder statement? And I think that was really one of the big takeaways from 5 to Survive.
Yeah, we've had a couple of successes in recent years, and it seemed like one was in terms of pandemic pay and what was temporary wage enhancement, then became permanent wage enhancement. And ours was one of the only sectors, apart from PSWs, that was given that was given that increase to our staff, much needed. And there was also an increase to passport funding as well of about 10%. I've got that right?
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and you're absolutely right, Brad. It's not to, I don't mean to negate the incremental gains we've had in
Yeah.
various things over the years, right? But
But
because
yeah,
otherwise, if we didn't, I'd be out of a job. So
yeah. No. We have had there was that, and then with Five to Survive, we came together around sort of a common theme and one message, and also I think there was more than 15,000 people signed the petition that we put together. We had more than 50 interactions with media, whether it be television or radio or newspaper interactions, and we did see movement response. The ministry appreciated what our message was, and it landed. I always find it hard. There's so much demand across so many sectors. When you're in government, you hear every day from people that need something, and so many are very deserving. How do you set yourself apart and above from what others are doing, and make the case that it's time to do something for us? And I think that Five to Survive was a really good example of I was inspired by that. It was fun to be a part of, and really good to know that we got much needed money. Really made a significant difference for our organization as well, who struggled really hard with budget issues last year. So what's next? You've got something else in the offering around advocacy and where you want to see the sector push for now. Why don't you tell us about the new endeavor?
Sure. So again, piggybacking on the success of Five to Survive, what we learned from that, the changing face of what advocacy means, what it can look like. Our next campaign is under the hashtag Waiting to Belong. And really what we're looking at there is not only the sector as it exists, but look at which supports their 35,000 people directly with supports and services right now. We're also looking to the 50,000 and growing list of people who are waiting for those services and supports. And so understanding that if we engage with those people and the families, the family groups, the networks that are out there, what does that look like for you on a day-to-day? And how can we connect that to our message to say, you know what, we need a stable, strong support sector who can provide, who is here, who is ready, willing, and able to provide those supports if government has the will to bring the resource to bear. So, we want to connect people and families to the message, to the campaign, to the efforts. So again, it's that collective effort, it's that collective voice, because really, again, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And so if we can get that message across and get the engagement of those who are looking from the outside in, then the resource flows, the necessity for a stable sector is compounded, because we need to make sure we've got our ducks in a row before we can bring more people in. And then ultimately, the goal is for people should have an entitlement to those supports and services. And so we've sort of tiptoed around that for many, many years because government didn't want to hear it. And we're at a point now where, well, too bad, government, because this is what we need. You're very good at labeling people. You're very good at assessing the level of support they need. And then you've been also very good at putting them over to the side to say, well, we'll get to you. Really, if your life becomes a crisis, then we'll support you. And that's not good enough. So Waiting to Belong is a long-term, multi-year approach to advocacy that keeps our issues in front of government. Because to your point, Brad, there's a lot of clutter out there. There's a lot of competition for their attention, for their action, for their resource. So we want to make sure that we provide the key messaging, the opportunities for all of our members and all of those family groups to engage, to be part of, and to push our efforts forward.
Sure. You used a word in there, entitlement, an entitlement to service. What do you mean? What's the difference between an entitlement and, say, a program that's offered? How would you define that?
So right now, all supports are totally discretionary. Right? The government can say you get something and you don't. This is when you get it, and this is when you don't. You're waiting. You're getting this much. You're getting this much. So it really is at the call it the whim. Obviously, there's more to it than that. but it really is up to government on what they're willing to fund and how much they're willing to fund it. So an entitlement is more like education or healthcare. We all have a right as citizens to walk into an ER at a hospital and expect to be served. We might have to wait a long time, but we know we're going to get served, right? Education, same thing. Our kids have a right to an education. All kids. That is a right of citizenship. And so we want to make that a right of citizenship for people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities.
That's great. I think sometimes the wording around discretionary and entitlement can get sort of mixed, because right now we've got the passport program that is sort of functioning like an entitlement, but because everybody sort of gets it when they're graduating high school, gets a notional allocation of $5,500 or whatever way you wait for your assessment, but it's not there as of right and now and we're really pushing for something that because of your disability, you have a right to a number of services throughout your life. And that could be, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is passport, the notional allocation of, the 5,500 waiting to get your full allocation. Why isn't that the full allocation at 18 or 21 when you're done school? You and I both know many families that are aging and worried about what the future looks like and what's going to happen to their son or daughter when they can no longer take care, if they're living together and those kinds of things. You're probably thinking about this, you and Lori yourself. Is there a point at which government says, we've got this, we will work with you to find out what that future looks like? Are those the kinds of things you've got in mind, or were there others that popped to mind? Or
first of all, are you saying I'm aging, Brad? I picked up on that. It's okay. It's okay. I get it.
Well,
yeah.
but technically we are all aging. We've aged in this call. So
fair enough. Some of us more than others, so point taken. You gave two great examples of the idea of full allocation of passport, in a reasonable time frame, whether it's 18 or 21 or whatever. We've got to move forward in a way that recognizes the cliff that people fall off of. And at the other end, where you're talking about, aging people, aging parents, living at home, what is it that we should be, as a society, we should commit to people to saying, you know what, it's reasonable that as a society, we owe it to people to at least know, like, when they die, that they should know that their kids are going to be okay, that they're going to have the supports they need, that it's not just going to be the rug pulled out from under them. That you should be rest assured, we've got you.
Yeah.
Right?
And not just when you die, like that as you're aging and that's becoming an inevitability, that you've seen what the circumstance is, where they're living, whether it's on their own with support or with others and roommates, that you have a sense of what that is, that reassurance. We as a province can do much better for parents who are worrying every day, what happens tomorrow, what happens when I can no longer provide what I'm doing now.
Absolutely. And when you look at those two sort of ends of the life course, earlier youth and later aging, I mean, if we get to an entitlement system, it's not going to be overnight and it's not going to be all at once. So where are two places where government could invest in the road or a pathway to entitlement? Right. And I think those are two really good places.
Yeah, excellent. Going to shift gears a little bit in that it's October is National Disability Employment Month, and is important for so many reasons, right? It generates income for you, it gives you a place to belong, something to do, and purpose. And many people have interesting, engaging careers that keep them engaged in life, and that throughout. Disability in employment in the disability community is a little different in that there's much higher rates of unemployment. It's sometimes hard to find a job that you're interested in and matches your and that. What's been your own your experience with this, either personally or from what you've seen, challenges around employment and things that are going well?
Again, another big question. Let's try and give a quick answer. Employment is one of those places where I think we've always had an uphill battle, and partly because as a community living movement, we said let's create sheltered workshops to make people
Right.
employment ready. We're going to give them training, we're going to give them some skills, and then they'll be ready for a job. And then, so we created that, we invented it with great intentions, and then found out that people spent 20, 30 years there because it was comfortable and there was a place to go, and the parents felt that that was a secure place to be.
Right.
Even though, as a movement, we said, yeah, we need to get people employment ready. So the idea was there that people should be included, they should have gainful employment. So we went through that era, right? So if I'm looking at sort of the trajectory, I think we're now coming out the other side of that to say, no, the best way to learn about employment is to get a job.
Right.
And that's where, we can provide supports on the job. And guess what? People who they work with will also be supportive, because we've seen that in the education system as well, right? Best support is typically another kid. So we're learning a lot about that. Now we're having to, I think, work with the Ministry of Labor, looking at the employment transformation and what that entails. And
It's been
big surprise,
big
it doesn't
impacts.
really think about people with intellectual disabilities. And so how support agencies are being compensated is only in jobs that are 20 hours or more per week. Well, we know a lot of our folks don't meet that threshold, at least not initially.
In our case, 50% of the people that we've supported employment supports are working less than that 20 hours a week, and often by choice, just because of their circumstance.
Absolutely. And by choice, or by, ability to, be in a place for a certain amount of time,
Right.
2 hours a day, 3 days a week, whatever it is. I think the value of that, and to your point, what does that instill in people? The idea of self-confidence, of camaraderie, of opportunity, of contribution, right? It doesn't matter how long, how many hours, you're still there, you're still doing a job. And if we can support a person to do that job, why does it have to be 20 hours? So that's a piece of advocacy that we're certainly working hard on right now, to try and, again, unintended consequence. Government likes to mix it up and change things out and transform things, as we know, but there's always fallout from that, and that's where we need to pay attention.
Yeah, excellent. So we've got a couple minutes left here. I want to ask you about the youth initiatives that Community Living Ontario operates. Oftentimes, because of inclusive education, people are growing up with, going to school with people that have disabilities of various types, and that's certainly been the experience of my own kids. And that what are some other ways that Community Living Ontario is working involve young people, and connecting them, and also having young people to understand the community living movement and what we're aiming towards?
Yeah, we're really big on connecting people to people. And so, whether it doesn't matter what age you are, but the younger or the sooner you can get connected to people, develop relationship, have experiences and opportunities, the better. So Student Links is an initiative we run in a number of places across Ontario, really looking to connect high school students with people in their community who share similar interests.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if it's a sport or a hobby or a vocation. If there's something that they've always wanted to explore or interested in, or are experiencing as a hobby, then let's connect you to someone in your community who's doing the same thing. And maybe you guys can connect and explore it together, or maybe this person can help you with a project you thought about, or maybe they can connect you to the local, if it's your carpentry or model railroads or the model airplane club or whatever it is, connect to the community, other people who are also interested in that. So we spend a lot of time investing in looking for opportunities, looking for those mentorship opportunities. Good. We've got where our youth work. Sorry, it's just, our youth work is really in full swing around connecting high school kids in their high schools with other kids who, with and without disabilities. How can you disrupt the status quo to create a more inclusive community? And start within your school, but then what does it look like in your community, and how can you work together to do that? And so we do a lot of work there. Again, the sooner we can get to people,
how do people find out more about the Student Links program?
Oh, we're all over the socials. We're all over
So use the
our
Googler, eh? And
website.
just search it
Google,
up.
use
And
the Google
okay, okay.
on that World Wide Web thingy.
Final question. You got 30 seconds if you need it. And we ask everybody this. Chris, what does belonging mean to you?
Oh, wow. Well, again, back when Mitchell was in grade 6, his school only went to grade 6. There was an award called the Citizenship Award, and it was voted on by the kids in that graduating class in grade 6. Mitchell got the Citizenship Award and the school, the principal said, no, you can't give it to him. He's not eligible. And the students said, well, it's for people, for someone who brings us together, who embodies what it's all about to be together, to belong. And so if it's not him, then it's nobody. So what are you going to do about that? So the principal had to relent because the students stood behind Mitchell and their choice to say, no, he embodies belonging. So that's what belonging means to me.
Wow, you're getting me all emotional here, Chris. That's what a great example of a community coming together. Thanks again for taking the time. Always a pleasure working with you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Leaders like Chris and others around the province work every day to inspire, advocate, and motivate us to do better. As a member of Community Living Ontario, we are grateful for his leadership and dedication. Thank you for joining our Community Chats podcast. We release a new edition on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so please subscribe to keep up to date. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.
Don't forget to join us next time as we unpack the power of community through collaborative initiatives and shared experiences. Available on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Audible, and YouTube. Follow us on social media at CL Toronto. Let's chat, share, and spread those good vibes together. We hope these discussions will inspire you and give new ideas to add your voice to our mission of making our communities and neighborhoods inclusive and welcoming.